Good morning. Good morning. Welcome to the Sunday morning worship service of DuPage Unitarian Universalist Church in Naperville, Illinois. I am Nell Hazlitt-Bruce, a member of your Board of Trustees. We're glad you're here, whether you are present in the sanctuary this morning or watching remotely. It's so good to be together. We welcome you to our church and invite you to get to know us better during and after the service. As Unitarian Universalists, we hold that there are many paths to truth and meaning, and we support one another on our spiritual and religious journeys while holding ourselves in covenant through our shared 7 principles. The mission of DuPage UU Church is to gather as an inclusive community, to grow in character, mind, and spirit, and to transform the world towards fairness, love, and compassion. Whoever you are, wherever you are on life's journey, you are welcome here. We have a couple of announcements this morning. A surprising 39% of community college students are food insecure. The Do-Gooders, that's D-U-U Gooders, Chalice Circle is working with the College of DuPage to stock its fuel pantry shelves for food insecure students. Now through February 4th, you'll see fuel pantry bins in the entryway. Please consider dropping off some non-perishable items during the month to help fuel young bodies and minds. The Committee on Shared Ministry, known as COSM, invites you to attend the first of 3 sessions to hear about the revised Covenant on Right Relations, or Covenant of Right Relations. The Covenant of Right Relations is our shared agreement on how we communicate and behave with each other. We'll review the old version and the newer, shorter version. The first session will be on January 28th during the Adult Religious Education Hour. We look forward to your feedback. Look for more information and a link to the updated covenant in upcoming newsletters and weekly updates. We will vote to adopt the new Covenant of Right Relations at the annual meeting of the church. Now, if you are online, I invite you to greet each other through the chat, and if you are present here, I invite you to turn to someone that you did not come with and greet them with a wave and a good morning greeting.
I light this chalice for the first source of our living tradition that draws from direct experience of that transcending mystery and wonder, affirmed in all cultures, which moves us to renewal of the spirit and the openness to the forces which create and uphold life.
Good morning. Good morning. Welcome to this place of love and warmth, of communal flourishing. We enter this worship space to open our hearts, to expand our minds, and to see the sacred within each other. Come, let us worship together.
Please rise in body or in spirit and join in singing together hymn number 346, Come Sing a Song with Me.
Our vision of beloved community is rooted in the relationships we have with each other, our world, and creation. Each week we share our joys and concerns here. Last week's flowers on our canceled Sunday were from Babs Shockley in memory or in honor of her sister's 75th birthday. Her sister lives in Germany, and in memory of her husband John's passing in January of 1983. Today's flowers were given by Ingrid Marshall in honor of all the friends and good memories she has collected since joining the church in 1988. She has so much gratitude for this community, and for those of you who are not aware, Ingrid recently moved to DeKalb to be in an assisted living place there. Sorry, this joy is from some friends of our family. Candace and Brooke, who you may remember attended my installation and ordination. Candace has a seeing eye dog. They are going to be welcoming 2 babies into this world as they're expecting. Yay! Oh my goodness. Whew. I wasn't quite expecting that. Thank you, Elias, for that lovely surprise. Whew. And as we turn to some sadder news, Jack Seacrest was hospitalized yesterday after having a hemorrhagic stroke. He is in ICU at Copley, and they wish everyone to please send positive and healing thoughts. We have also had two milestones in the life of this congregation. And we will light candles in honor of two of our members who have passed away. Dorothy Stevens passed away 2 weeks ago, and Nancy Fleming passed away on Friday. These bright lights in our community have joined the greater flame of our ancestors. May their love and their light be remembered by all of us forevermore. Please join me in a poem by Mary Oliver on yesterday's anniversary of her passing. Look, the trees are turning their own bodies into pillars of light, are giving off the rich fragrance of cinnamon and fulfillment. The long tapers of cattails are bursting and floating away over the blue shoulders of the ponds. And every pond, no matter what its name is nameless now. Every year, everything I have ever learned in my lifetime leads back to this: the fires and the black river of loss, whose other side is salvation, whose meaning none of us will ever know. To live in this world, you must be able to do three things: to love what is mortal, to hold it against your bones, knowing that your own life depends on it, and when the time comes to let it go, to let it go.
It is time to gather. Let's start with a book titled A Church for All by Gail Pittman. Sunday waking. Let's go to our church for all. Day is breaking. Choir singing, laughing voices. Church bells ringing, joyful noises. Weak and healthy, neat and messy. It's here at our church for all. Feel the Spirit. Can you hear it? Hearts believing, hearts accepting, hands receiving, hands connecting. Toddlers flailing, babies wailing. There's room at our church for all. Bodies wiggling, mommies reading, children giggling, daddies pleading. All embracing, spirit gracing, each one at our church for all, poor and wealthy, plain and dressy, candles glowing, banners flowing. Come enter our church for all.
Each Sunday we come here to be together at this moment. We come into this room together and participate in something called worship.
Now, for many churches, worship means that you praise a god, goddess, or being. In a Unitarian Universalist church, worship can mean praising a god or divine being, but it can also mean taking time out of your week to focus, center yourself, or be in community with other people.
Regardless of whether you worship a god or just come to be in this place together, the act of worship is one that is meant to take us out of ordinary time, to touch something larger than ourselves. We call it ordinary time because that's when we do everything else. When we enter this space, we step out of ordinary time into special time, a time where something extraordinary might happen.
One mark of our worship time together is something Reverend Mandy does by wearing her robe into worship. It tells her and other people that this is special time to be together.
What kind of extraordinary thing might happen in this space? Well, the idea of worship is that we might be united and transformed by love. We become something new, or think a new way, or want to change the way that we do things in this world. In this extraordinary time, we might also call it sacred time or special time, we do something called ritual to make this time special.
Rituals are acts that are done to remember. Rituals can mark important things, like how on Ingathering Sunday in August, we always pour water together as we return to community, or we have fire communion at the New Year's to start a fresh year.
Rituals are also small acts of remembrance. We light our chalice each week to remind ourselves that we are Unitarian Universalists. We also read one of our principles or sources for the same reason.
In fact, our whole order of service is a type of ritual. It is usually the same week to week because the familiarity of doing the same thing over and over again is comforting and yet challenges us to be intentional.
A good ritual will try to lead us on a journey. That is why Steve, Vera, Amanda, and I work really hard to make sure that the music, the stories, the readings, the prayers, the sermons, and reflections all follow a topic or a theme. This helps us to dig deeper into extraordinary time, to be transformed. It also helps us to grow together as a community.
We also work really hard to make sure that one part of the ritual moves really nicely into another. For example, we use the singing bowl as a way to move our mind from speaking to singing, or we sing a song between two speaking parts.
We also try to make sure that worship is participatory. That means we have different speakers and that we move our bodies through singing, saying hi to each other, the time together, or by praying.
Worship may not always be fun, at least not the playing on the playground kind of fun. We are usually quiet in worship. We do not usually run around in worship. It sometimes might even feel like worship is talking and using really big words that we don't all understand.
Worship is a very important thing to do. It's actually the most important thing that churches do because it is the time for all of us to be together. In a way, we can think about extraordinary time as stopping time or separating it from all the normal everyday things we do. It is the time when we act together to remember the things that are most important to us and to transform us.
And guess what? As part of our church, you can share with Reverend Mandy and me your ideas for worship. What songs do you like to sing? What topics or ideas do you have for a service? Maybe we should do a service about a video game, or maybe about your favorite book or TV show. Talk to us after the service about what you want to see here, because this is your time too. Let's sing to the children. For the majority of the history of religion in the United States, faith formation has occurred outside of a classroom. Families recognize the Sabbath together. Now, 17th century Puritans took the Sabbath very seriously, enacting harsh measures known as blue laws. And starting in the mid-1600s, any Sunday activity that took away from worship was strictly forbidden. Aspects of these blue laws remained in effect for centuries, leaving household responsibilities and worship as the only option for Sunday activities. Families prayed together, celebrated the traditions of their faith together, and worshiped together. This was faith formation. Sunday school did not exist. In fact, the earliest public schools in the United States were not academically focused, but instead taught morality and virtues, focusing on family, religion, and community. It wasn't until mid-19th century that public education shifted its focus to academics. Now, it wasn't until the 1940s and 50s that the Sunday school model that we recognize today came to life. Church and religion still played a significant role in U.S. culture. Sunday school mimicked the structure of public schools, providing age-segregated classes for children to receive religious instruction and lessons. And these programs were often run by the minister's spouse or by a parent in the congregation. And it was decades before program administrators were compensated for their work. Now, the 1960s and 70s ushered in an anti-establishment culture, with baby boomers rebelling against institutions, including churches. In the late 1970s and 80s, innovative pastors and congregations of all sizes and denominations looked for ways to draw boomers back to church. They began to create worship experience based on the unique personality of the boomer generation. And these churches went with contemporary, seeker-based or seeker-friendly worship. And because these were the primary parenting years for boomers, these congregations recognized the need to not only provide boomer-friendly worship experience for adults, but the need to create dynamic experiences for their children as well, knowing that if the kids wanted to come back, the parents were more likely to come back. And thus began the shift from families worshiping together to creative and attractive Sunday school programs for kids, and offered at the same time as the worship service. Suddenly, in the Unitarian Universalist spaces, children and adults were having drastically different Sunday morning experiences in isolation from each other. Some churches would exclude children from the worship experience completely, expecting Sunday school to engage them and meet their needs until such time as they became recognized as adults. And many UU churches still do this. So the pendulum swung from one direction where congregations gathered as a single body, mixing, to the other direction where people were gathered by age or cohort, huddling. The long-term and unintended consequence of this strategy was a generation of young people who had no connection to their faith or congregation outside of Sunday school. The implicit message of this divergent approach was that what happened in the sanctuary was for adults. It was framed as being boring and unappealing for children. Young people spent their childhood and adolescence segregated from the adult congregation. And in our Unitarian Universalist tradition, bridging out of the youth ministry program essentially meant bridging out of the church. The only connection of the youth to the church was through their peers, who were also moving on. Now, considering that the pendulum swung from mixing to huddling, it is now time to land somewhere in between, offering opportunities for people of all ages to be in community together, mixing, as well as opportunities to gather with peers in similar ages or stages of life, huddling. Intentional family ministry provides adults with opportunities to dig deeper into their own beliefs, strengthening their ability to discuss the values and history of Unitarian Universalism with their children. This creates the opportunity to bring church home and increase the amount of time to share, reflect on, and act upon our church morals and ideals. As compared to in the past, our children received an average of less than 40 hours of faith formation for the whole year. We also know that adults need just as much faith formation as children and youth. Roughly 88% of adult members come to Unitarian Universalism from other faith traditions or from no tradition at all. The lack of faith development for UU adults is a serious problem, resulting in a high percentage of adults with a tenuous connection to or understanding of Unitarian Universalism. Parents and caregivers would now have space to talk about the spiritual aspects of parenting or learn how to support their children as they go through our whole lives programs. With intentional family ministry, faith formation is no longer seen as just for children. In fact, it is structured in a way that encourages participation from the entire congregation. So for most UU congregations, moving to a whole congregation worship would be a substantial shift. And Unitarian Universalism is one of the few denominations in the United States that assumes that children cannot and should not be in a weekly worship with adults for an entire hour. Now the UUA's 2005 Commission on Appraisal report found that the way UUs raise our children seems to prepare them for something completely different than what Unitarian Universalism actually offers. And this suggests that UUs should change one or the other, or both. Without experiencing worship with the whole congregation, UU children and youth cannot learn how to be in a sanctuary, let alone benefit from the spiritual practice of a congregational worship. They cannot see adults modeling moments of silence or stewardship, caring deeply for one another with expressions of joy and sorrow, singing the songs of our faith, or sharing in the ministry of worship. As a positive, Over the past couple decades, our church, DuPage U Church, has been known as one of the foremost forward-thinking and innovative churches in the region and the UUA as a whole. There are several U churches using our current model of worship and religious education, and over the next decade, many more will follow as it becomes evident that this is the new paradigm for successful faith formation. Giving of our treasure is how we reciprocate the many gifts we are given by this community. Your contribution supports the programs and operations of DuPage UU Church. Giving is also how we live our values in the world. Each month, we share our offerings with an organization nominated by the congregation and selected by the special offering team. The January special offering will benefit DUC's SMILE project. The SMILE project was designed to provide mentoring and work experiences to high school students who are not the top of their class nor in the bottom quarter, but those who could use encouragement and help to prepare for entering the workforce after high school. We have mentored 36 students, impacted 18 business groups, including 2 police departments. In addition, family members from each student have felt the effects of these experiences, as have the leaders of the 4 high schools with which the students have attended. The morning's offering to support the work of DuPage Unitarian Universalist Church and of the SMILE Project is given and received in a spirit of generosity and gratitude.
Parenting is hard. Our our earliest ancestors spent their lives as parents just ensuring that their children stayed alive. As we evolved, society became more sophisticated and people slowly began to live longer. Raising children then became about raising them into a role. Now, that role could be a profession, a title of nobility, or into a mother, because let's face it, women didn't really have any other choice. The hardship of parenting was less about survival and more about getting a child to conform to familial and societal expectations. But eventually, parenting turned even less into survival, and those roles and expectations were loosened. Throughout the 20th century, we see parenting shift towards helping children find successful careers and creating their own successful family lives. Now, during all of this, the difficulties of a world fraught with danger, war, plague, strife, conflict, and change was ever present. And make no mistake, parenting was hard. But in the last 50 years or so, what it means to be a parent, to raise children, is so completely different to anything that came before it. One of the reasons for this is because society has a better understanding of the psychological and emotional needs of children that impact who they are as adults. We know that taking the time to help our children regulate their emotional and social health is vital to helping them live into their full selves. It is not that that sort of attitude didn't exist in the past, but it just wasn't as well understood or emphasized, and societal expectations overruled any of that kind of thinking. If you grew up in a household that told you boys don't cry, that women don't show anger, or one in which physical punishment was deemed okay, you know that that shift has happened. And it's an important one because it takes a lot of time and energy on the part of parents to truly mentor and nurture our children in this new attitude of parenting. As a society, we also began to understand the beautiful differences that exist in the minds and bodies of human beings. Diagnoses of special needs seem to me be more prevalent because they are. When we understand special needs better, we can help our children more. Yet the support systems for children and families with special needs has not caught up to the actual needs of our families, which is another component that parents are experiencing in the change to be parents. When things were simpler, because they were, children were expected to conform to societal and communal ideas of behavior. We now know that conforming, especially forced conformity, is detrimental to all children, most especially those with special needs. So parents are often forced into further states of stress when their children do not behave in a way expected by previous parenting generations, often embarrassing them and their children. Another change that has happened is that technology has sped up time. Now, we all know that time cannot actually speed up, but the constant demand for new and improved everything, and the constant expectation for us to keep up with it all, deeply impacts the feeling that time is speeding up. We all move, think, work faster. This impacts all that programming that children do these days. Rather than those long evenings outside in the backyard with friends, if our children do not participate in every single extracurricular, they may not be up to date, which can impact schooling and future job performance, or at least that's what society tells us. Technology has changed us in another way. All of those ever-present difficulties of war, strife, and conflict, those are still present, but now they're in your face all the time. Our children have access to more awful news than ever before. And there is simply more war, strife, and conflict. The actions of all the previous generations are also landing on the shoulders of our children as well, global warming among them. How do you parent when you are not sure there will even be a world for your children? And then you go back to the social or the emotional and psychological health piece, and many of us become so overwhelmed. The idea of adding a volunteer gig or making cookies for a bake sale becomes somewhat of a joke. Parenting is hard. It's always been hard, but parenting has reached a whole other level of difficulty. Add to all of that is that we are continuing to buy into the myth of the nuclear family. For centuries, families of 3 and sometimes 4 generations would live together. Parents did not bear the burden of parenting alone. And if they were not living together, they were at least living generationally, geographically close. Parents did not bear the burden of parenting alone. Even their older children would help with younger children as family size was larger than it is now. We have bought into this unsustainable model of child raising with all the pressures that have always been there, plus a myriad more. It's no wonder that families are struggling and that the pandemic shutdown has been a trying time. This situation is unconscionable and completely unnecessary. As a parent, I know this is real. I often feel the failure of parenting and unreasonable expectations. Like many of you, I sometimes feel like I am drowning. Like many of you, church became a real priority for Elias and I at the birth of our first child. We wanted a community to help us impart our values to our children, since both of us were over 1,000 miles from our parents. Little did I know, however, that my children would get so much more from church than supporting our values. My children's strongest friendships began at church. We attended the early service, and afterwards, all, the children would play around the buildings and grounds during the second service and the second coffee hour. Sunday mornings were literally their favorite day of the week because of the relationships they had at church. Now, lest you think it was all about the children, most Sunday mornings had Luna, my oldest, and Miss Annette, my 70-year-old office volunteer, sitting on a bench during coffee hour chatting away. Sometimes it was Miss Mary, though, who would chat about books and writing. She was a retired English teacher. Miss Janine always had a hug for my children, and it was Miss Janine that encouraged Luna's quiet voice to grow and speak more confidently during weeks of religious education class. Little Tim versus Big Tim, who was the DRE, would make sure that the children had a wash rag and window cleaner on Sunday morning work days, assigning window and baseboard cleaning to the children, or they would rake leaves with Mr. Dave in the yard. Speaking of Mr. Dave, he and his wife, Miss Janet, offered to bring frozen pizzas and hang out with our children on occasion. That was how 2 of our date nights happened. Miss Katrina would always converse with my children and always tell me not to speak for them. She paid attention to my kids and helped me learn a lesson in parenting. Some of you all did this for my children here. Karen Seymour and Kelly Trombley-Freitag both made my children feel welcome and invited during candidating week. Tony Morgan often checks in with my kids on Sundays. The entire choir has welcomed Luna to sing with them. Justin Hobbs has welcomed Luna, Lucian, and Lulu Knight to the AV volunteers. You've all made my children feel welcomed and loved. And it doesn't end with my children. Kelly and Holly Harris have made sure that children are full parts of the winter solstice service. Tony Morgan chats with, well, let's face it, chats with everybody, but most especially with our children. Kat Gelder and Justin Verson sit with our young people in our grace space. What ways might you help our children feel a part of our community? How might you help a parent? Being part of a church certainly instilled my kids with values. I see it all the time in the ways they engage in ethical dilemmas or comment on the news. But it was the community itself, our church communities, that gave my children the confidence and support to state those values out loud. They knew they would be heard if they spoke out. They still know this. And as a parent, the burden of not only raising morally guided children rooted in UU values, but also the burden to raise children who are emotionally intelligent and confident in the world was cemented in a UU church. It was when Luna and their church friend were 12 and 11 that I finally knew the value of church for my family. Like many churches, our congregation in New Jersey had the children leave mid-service for religious education classes. One Sunday, completely unbeknownst to me or to Fern's parents, Luna and Fern approached the minister and asked for the joys and sorrows portion of the service to be placed before the children left for their religious education classes. The previous Sunday, news about a member had been announced, but Fern and Luna had not heard it until almost a week later because they had left the sanctuary prior to the announcement. Luna and Fern wanted to know what was going on for the people in their church, people that they knew. In fact, they were willing to stay longer in service to get this news because they knew that they were full members of the church, even if they couldn't vote or pledge. The minister made the change. Churches are places where we instill our values in our children. It's not possible to instill any values, though, if it only happens one time, once per week in a classroom separated from community. It's also not possible to instill those values if we're not supporting our parents in child raising. Nor is it possible to instill those values if we as a community are not involved in showing and sharing, modeling and enacting our values to our children directly. We need to model that what we wish to see in the world, and more importantly, we need to inspire, support, and love our children into becoming all of who they can become, rooted in our belief that we can bring justice and love to this world through beloved community. Our future is here in this room. It is present here because we believe that they are a vital part of who we are and who we want to be. May it be so. voice of love, of communal flourishing, is a home for all people. May we embrace our elders whose vision created and sustained this home, and may we embrace the future found in our children. We are all in this together.
Please join me in saying our chalice extinguishing words. We extinguish the light of this chalice, but not the light in our hearts. Until we meet again, may the warmth of our community carry you.